collaboration with the Cyprus Mail. This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Charalambous.
Coming up this week, the International Short Film Festival starts next week in Limassol.
These films that we are about to screen are not the typical 3D films that the audience is used to. It's not like the American blockbuster films. It's not like cartoons in 3D.
We'll talk to an expert about fighting human trafficking.
60 to 70% of identified victims of human trafficking are in sexual exploitation.
And hear about the visit of a Paralympic cyclist who's urging people in Cyprus to get on their bikes.
Cycling in Cyprus over the last 5 years has exploded so fast that we're now trying to catch up with the trends.
Next week sees the start of the 5th International Short Film Festival of Cyprus, which runs from the 17th to the 23rd of October. As always, a feast for cinema lovers, but there's a parallel programme too. To tell us all about it, the joint artistic directors of the festival are with us on the Cyprus News Digest. It's a welcome to Alexia Roida and to Joachim Milonas. Alexia, tell us about this year's festival. I know that you've been involved, I think, since the beginning, and you're always trying to do something extra, something different each year.
Exactly, and especially because it's our 5th anniversary this year, we try to incorporate new things in the program. So apart from the international competition that we have every year and the national competition, we have included a very special parallel program this year, which includes 3-dimensional short films. So it's a selection of experimental shorts which will be shown at the Rio Cinema in Limassol in real 3D, so the audience has to watch it with glasses. And it's a very interesting program. We've actually seen a lot of these films in the Oberhausen Film Festival in Germany, where they were screened for the first time together. And we decided that this is very important, and we've invited the curator from Berlin to come to Cyprus and present a selection of these shorts.
What sort of difference does this 3D dimension bring to the whole essence of films? I know you're a filmmaker yourself, Alexia. What about you, Joachim? Are you a filmmaker or a film consumer, or both?
Both. Both.
So how would you say 3D impacts the whole cinema industry?
It's a relatively new format, although it has been around since the 70s, I think. However, the complete language has not developed yet. Therefore, what we are presenting now is a bunch of young filmmakers trying to discover on how to use the 3D to the benefit of the story and the viewer.
And how would you say you do that, Alexia? I mean, what does it bring to a film as a director? When would you say, I need to do this in 3D, and know that it was going to enhance the finished product?
Well, these films that we are about to screen are not the typical 3D films that the audience is used to. It's not like the American blockbuster films. It's not like cartoons in 3D. They're actually artistic films, experimental films, which use imagery in a very creative 3-dimensional way. One of the films comes from China, and it has to do with paper cut animation drawings, so you get that experience in 3D. Another one is with dancers, and it's filmed with thermal cameras. It's quite an extraordinary visual thing that I cannot really describe. One has to actually experience it.
It does sound as if it's something that is impossible in a sense to make people understand, but what I also want to know is, as a filmmaker, what do you see when you're looking through the camera if you're filming in 3D?
While filming, everything is two-dimensional, of course.
Which I thought it was, which is why it must make it... I mean, how do you know?
It's based on the stereoscopic view, let's say. It's in technical terms, it's like you put two cameras in close proximity. You have special lenses and all this kind. It's very technical.
So until you finish actually doing the shoot or taking it back to look at the rushes, you don't know if you've got what you want.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it really comes to life in the post-production. That's where you discover what you've done in the filming. That's where you discover the possibilities. So I think it's a process where you just try things out, really.
OK, let's get to the programme for this year's film festival. First of all, perhaps tell us a little bit about the parallel programme and all the events that you've got going on around it.
OK, so our first parallel programme starts on Sunday the 18th. So after the official competition at 11 o'clock outdoors, it's outdoor screenings at the Platia Iron. We have Aspects of the Fantastic, which is a selection of the best animation films that were screened this year with a lot of award-winning films. On Monday the 19th, we have a program which is dedicated to dance. So it's dancing in film. It's a compilation of very interesting shorts that deal with dancing, dancers, whether it's a documentary, an experimental film, a narrative, or just a musical. We also have a parallel program which is dedicated to African films coming from Uganda, which is very interesting. And we have the 3D program, as we said, which is on the 21st of October at 7 o'clock at Cinema Rio. The next day we have Cyprus Comic Con, a retrospective, which is a collaboration that we've started also this year. And we finish off with a competition that we do every year, which is called Amaze Me, and it's a competition for very creative music videos.
So that covers an awful lot of different areas. Now, apart from the 3D one, these are all being shown outdoors. Weather's changing. Will you move inside to the Rialto if need be?
If need be, yes, but it was never necessary to do so. In October, the weather is, I think it's the perfect time for Cyprus. There is no humidity. It's a bit chilly at night, so it's very cozy. We do it out in the Hero Square in Limassol, just opposite the Rialto Theatre. It's very interesting because you can have a seat in small tables and little groups of people and have your drink, or for smokers they can smoke, and you can watch interesting parallel programs.
Right, so there's a lot of films coming up. I'm sure they're all listed on a website. Where can people sort of see what's going on? And after you've told me that, I want you both to, if dare you, are you allowed to pick a personal favourite?
Okay, so all the information can be found on our website, which is www.isffc.com.cy, and of course on our Facebook page. Feel free to visit us, like us, so you get updated on all the news and happenings. And, well, favorites. I wouldn't be able to pick one favorite. We're screening about 100 films, and we like so many of them. So I think people should just come and watch and enjoy and pick their own favorites.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Have you got a personal favourite?
I'm going to be as diplomatic as Alexia was, and because each film is handpicked, therefore they are all favourites. So it's up to our jury of professionals and up to the very demanding audience.
They have come to expect something of you now, haven't they? I mean, when this first started, it was a much smaller event. So each night you've got how many films being shown?
On average, it's over 20, on average.
Also, I'd like to add that all screenings start at 8:30 at the Rialto Theatre in Limassol, and it's free. All the programs and all the parallel programs are free, so we invite people to come. And would also like to say that the festival is organized by the Cyprus Ministry of Education and Culture and the Rialto Theatre.
A busy, busy time, so do join them in Limassol. And any of them being shown in other towns?
Not during the festival. After the festival travels to other cities, but there we have the opportunity to screen a selection, a small selection of
presumably the
yes,
winners.
The winners and some other selected films. Yes.
So that will be coming to you, but the best place to see it is, of course, while the 5th International Short Film Festival of Cyprus is up and running between the 17th and 23rd of October down in Limassol. Enjoy it.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
One of the keynote speakers at the Best Practices in Combating Human Trafficking conference that took place in Nicosia earlier this week was Bernie Gravett. He's Director of Specialist Policing Consultancy in the UK. Bernie, we don't often think so much about the policing side of trafficking, but there are best practices and protocols in place that do appear to be much more successful when they're implemented. Is that the sort of thing that you're training people in other parts of the world and in the UK to deal with?
Yeah, certainly. I led the first European joint investigation team under EC law. If you sign an agreement with another country, you have all your investigative powers on that foreign soil with your partners, and equally they would have powers, in this case in the UK, on our investigation. And that was the first time that had been done on human trafficking in Europe, and it was 2008 that we signed that agreement. Conducted an investigation up to 2010 about trafficking of Roma children for begging and stealing, which is quite a unique subject in human trafficking. About 60 to 70% of identified victims of human trafficking are in sexual exploitation. It is the most common. I think most police forces are geared up to recognise that, but I think there's a huge level of human trafficking in and around labour exploitation, which includes trafficking of children in their thousands. So that's really my area of specialty. So I was a police officer for 30 years, finished my contract with the Metropolitan Police, and then formed a company so that I could, I suppose, carry on the work to, one, raise awareness of the issue, to share my skills of creating such a team, and that option's open not just to European countries, but also to non-EU countries. And with trafficking being a world crime, it's moving someone predominantly from country A to country B and exploiting them. Members of non-EU states can be members of joint investigation teams, but it's never happened yet. So part of what I see as my mission now, albeit as a private company, is to try and spread the word around. We can talk about finding victims, but we need to lock up the perpetrators.
And that's where a lot of the things that are going on fall down, isn't it? Because we've heard quite frightening figures on the conference about the minute number of suspected cases that actually either end up in court or, more importantly, get convictions. I mean, how can that change?
I think we've got to change the way we work. A lot of police human trafficking work is what I term as reactive. We wait for the victims to come to us, and that that's such a small percentage that are either fed up with their conditions. One of the speakers said that they have a lot of success in the labour market because people come and complain about the conditions they're in, and then it's found out that they're trafficked. But in sexual exploitation, it's very rare. We do some vice work. Most police forces have a department to deal with vice, but you're right, the numbers are so small. My view is that we need to go proactive. We know what countries the victims are coming from, we know what countries they're going to, and we know from what data we do have the forms of exploitation that take place. My view, let's go looking. So that is, if you raid a brothel, make sure that everyone has a briefing on human trafficking, make sure you collect the evidence from the crime scene, because every raid is a crime scene. And what I find in my police experience is we are very victim focused. We will talk to the victims, we will try and persuade them to come to us, and we will save you. We can't save them. If it's a victim of sexual exploitation, they're probably in the UK earning £500 to £1,000 a week that they keep themselves. The gang keep a lot more, but they can send that back to their families in their country of origin, look after their kids, look after their families. So we've got to be more realistic, and what we've got to do is collect the intelligence that we have from those raids, the stories of the victims. We don't necessarily need them for the prosecution, but I think I'm very big into the analysis of data that we collect on that journey, and then see if we can target the criminals for money laundering, for other types of crime, because if they're in prison, they can't traffic.
But the other problem, of course, for some of the victims is there is no way they even have a chance to get in touch with the authorities. They're kept in prison-like conditions. So we're talking as well about people who are basically slave labour, whether it's in the sex or any other form of labour market. What about them? There's no way you can reach them, is there?
No, I think it's a challenge. I must dispel a myth. Victims are not locked up. The majority of victims are free to move around. The pressures on them are psychological, and this is actually one of the challenges for law enforcement, because the negative side of police officers who come and deal with this, who see a woman in sexual exploitation who arrives at the brothel on her own via public transport, leaves on her own and goes and lives in a commune, they say, well, why don't you, you're a traffic victim, why don't you run away? Well, recruitment is local in the majority of cases. She would have been recruited. The people in her town or village would know her and her family. This is a locally based global problem. So we have an issue in the UK of Vietnamese children being trafficked to grow cannabis in cannabis farms. The number of cannabis farms in England discovered in 2007 was 800. By 2011 it was 8,000. 96% of Vietnamese controlled. So these kids in Vietnam are promised lots of money so they can feed their family, their village, and then they're trapped psychologically. It's debt slavery, it's bondage, and it is pure fear. They don't run away, so 9 times out of 10 they're actually not locked up. And that actually is a struggle for law enforcement, but equally from governments to understand the issue.
So what's the answer? Is there one?
And the answer is we need more resources for the police. The UK itself only has 3 human trafficking teams out of 45 police forces, 1 in London, 1 in West Yorkshire and 1 in Scotland. In other police forces, if a case comes to light, then it will go to the serious organised crime team. We've got to deal with drugs, murders and everything else. In other countries, it's slightly different. But I think the biggest thing is we are over-reliant because of the criminal justice system wants a victim to stand in court, whether there's a curtain in front of them or not, and tell their story. We need to move away from that because these victims are not going to tell. They're under huge pressure. And even if we put a mask in front of them, a curtain in front of them, the detail that they're giving about the gang probably know who they are anyway. So, we offer protection to victims when they're giving testimony in court. So again, I go back to sort of my main thrust is we've got to rely less on victim testimony, more in using the other tools that we've developed through murders, through terrorism, i.e. forensics, crime scene examination and other analysis of other activity, surveillance and stuff, to identify the gang and go at it at that end, not from the victim's end.
That's Bernie Gravitt, who is a consultant to trafficking forces in the UK and throughout the world.
You can subscribe to the Cyprus News Digest on iTunes for free and get the program downloaded to your phone or tablet so you can listen anytime, anywhere.
Paralympian Simon Richardson has been here in Cyprus for the last week, talking to school children and giving lectures and going on a very special bike ride. He joins us on the programme this week. Simon, you've had 2 very nasty accidents that have turned you from a sort of competitive cyclist in the sense that we normally think of cyclists to a Paralympian with 2 gold medals. Tell us a little bit about how this all happened.
I started cycling when I was about 35 because we had a small motorbike accident and I lost confidence of riding on the road. So I started riding a push bike. After probably about a year, I decided to buy a road bike and I got hooked into cycling. I started racing in about 2000 and I was enjoying it, so I thought 2001 I'd start racing properly. And I had a car clip me from the right-hand side in January 2001, which left me with a broken right leg and small damage to my back. But after being in the hospital for just 4 days, they checked me out and they said the back was okay and everything, so I went back to racing. But I was having severe pain. And after I went to see a specialist, they realised my back was actually still broken. And I could have severed the spine at any time if I'd hit any bumps on the road sort of thing while racing. So, because of the time it'd been between the accident and actually the operation, they had to do 2 operations, one in 2001 and one in 2003, to sort of rebuild part of the discs and the spine that had collapsed. But what it left me with was nerve damage to my left-hand side. So it actually left me with a complete weakness on my left-hand side. So I started basically just basic physio and just very basic stuff, no cycling involved. I wasn't going to go back to cycling, but I had problems with the left leg and a possibility of losing it. So they decided that I needed to do something. So they said that I had to go back to cycling just to get the blood flow back to the legs, so that is actually I was going to keep it. So in about 2005, beginning of 2006, I started back on indoor training. Then at the end of 2006, I did my first race. And it went okay. I came second. There was only about 4 of us in it for the disabled groups. First ever disabled race I'd ever done. First time I'd ever heard of disabled cycling. So again, I enjoyed that. So I went through the winter of 2006 and into January, February of 2007. And I started using the velodrome in Newport. Again, got hooked on that. Got seen by the Welsh disabled coach, who contacted the British disabled coach, and he came down without my knowing to watch me actually training in Newport. I then had a phone call in first week in May, give or take, to say that they want me to go to Spain and France to do stage racing. So that was my first introduction then into actual international racing, was straight into the deep end, racing with all these pro elite disabled riders. I managed to squeeze a 5th out of the race, out of that stage race, which got me an invitation to the World Championships at the end of 2007. I got 8th and 9th on the track in the kilometre and the 3 kilometre. I got 5th in the time trial on the road, but the pack crashed in the road race and I went down with it and broke my collarbone, so I didn't finish the road race. But then I carried on training with them. I was a guest rider for the British team, so I went to a few races with them. And then in May time again in 2008, I was in Manchester and I broke the kilometre world record. Ended up with the world best time because the drug commissioners weren't there, so they couldn't test us. So you get world best, not a world record. I then got a phone call in about the June to invite me to Beijing.
And there, of course, you got your 2 gold medals.
Yeah.
That must have been a real high spot. But since then, you've had another accident, and now I think you spend a fair amount of time, like you are here in Cyprus, encouraging youngsters to get on their bikes.
Yeah, we're trying to plant the seed in the younger generation and get them riding so that when they do get older, they go into the jobs that will be able to support disabled cycling and also be able to increase the popularity of the sport, and even just able-bodied sport, bringing that on and incorporating disabled with able-bodied and trying to bring it on that way.
And let's bring in George Apostolou here, who is the Vice President of the Cyprus Cycling Federation. George, it was your idea to bring Simon here. Cycling really has a long way to go in Cyprus, doesn't it? We've still not got the infrastructure, and kids very often aren't allowed out on their bikes simply because it's too dangerous.
That's correct. That's at least the current mentality. I don't think it's a matter of infrastructure as much as it is a matter of culture and cycling conscious, which is the first thing that we need to create in Cyprus. We need to inspire and educate both the children, the cyclists, and of course the families, what cycling is all about and what safe cycling is all about. Because most of us know how to cycle since we're very young. Most of us also in Cyprus do not know how to safely cycle.
Well, you very rarely see cyclists with helmets on, for a start.
I would disagree with that. There's no law up to this point, although there is a bill in Parliament being prepared. The helmet issue is a difficult issue because there are a lot of studies discussing whether it should be mandatory or not. In my opinion, it should. I'm sure Simon would agree with me. But our cycling clubs and our athletes, almost all of them, do use a helmet every time they go out cycling. Now, in terms of urban cycling, yes, I would agree with you. Most people just go around the city without a helmet on.
But the other problem, George, is the attitude of people on four wheels, isn't it? Because
yes.
drivers here never seem to leave an adequate gap between a cyclist and, you know, they pass so close by, you think, gosh, if there's a pothole or he wobbles, that's not going to be very nice.
I would agree with that, and that's why I spoke about creating and infusing the population with a cycling culture and cycling conscious, because that would also mean educating the drivers. If you start through children and families, then invariably you will not just educate cyclists, but you will educate the drivers, most of whom at some point, I hope, will become cyclists, so they will know what it means to be on the other side of the bonnet of that car. It's not something which is unique to Cyprus. This is something that someone meets around the world. We are now working with the Ministry of Transportation and the Ministry of Education and the Press Information Office in trying to get the rights for a safety cycling campaign, which comes from Queensland, Australia, with the title Stay Wider Than the Rider. And we hope through television and going through schools and also preparing a leaflet, a brochure for bike shops to hand over and hand out to people purchasing new bikes, that we will change slowly the safety culture, meaning wearing always your helmet, staying wider than the rider when you drive a car behind them, and following basic rules like using secondary and primary positions on the road, riding abreast when you're more than three, which is something which is new in Cyprus. Cycling in Cyprus over the last 5 years has exploded so fast that we're now trying to catch up with the trend of cycling as a federation.
Simon, if we come back to you, I mean, this idea of talking to kids, are they aware of the issues involved, particularly when it comes to cycling safely?
I think they're starting to get there. We went to a school the other day and they wanted to ride with me, and we were only riding around the schoolyard, and none of them would get on their bikes till they got the helmets. And they only had 4 helmets, so they were all taking it in turns to ride. But that's the start. It is there, it's just, as it is anywhere in the world, it's getting that initial culture of fashion statement. A helmet's not fashionable, so they don't wear it. If their peer doesn't wear it, then they won't wear it. So you've got to try and get the adult to wear the helmet, you've got to try and get the child to wear the helmet. And once one wears it, then hopefully their friends will start to wear it. It's trying to get into their heads that if they're out cycling with their friend and they got the helmet on and their friend hasn't, and they have a car accident, one of them could end up dead, and it's usually one without the helmet. And it's just trying to get that into their minds so that they pick up their helmet every time.
And from the schools you've visited while you've been here and the people you've spoken to, including the 250-odd people who turned up to join you on that cycle ride last week, do you feel that there is this movement, as George was saying, towards a cycling culture here?
It is, but I think it's going to take quite a while. It's still struggling in the UK, and it's been so high profile in the UK. You still get the problems with traffic passing too close. So for Cyprus starting from where it is, which is right down the bottom run of the ladder, it's going to take a long time, maybe 5-10 years, to even get that seed planted fully in the children. And it's just going to take a long time to get to where it needs to be safe out there cycling.
That was Simon Richardson, MBE, who is a Paralympian gold medalist in cycling, and George Apostolou, Vice President of the Cyprus Cycling Federation. And their message has been, on your bike, but do it safely. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.